Good morning from the East Coast. It is 10 a.m. here, and we are going to have another episode of Countdown to Launch. And today I have a fantastic guest with me. His name is Garrett Gibbons. Hopefully, did I say that okay, Garrett?
Yes.
Excellent. And we're going to be talking about First Ascent. I'm really excited to hear about this game. The theme, it just looks so cool. Um, I've tried it a couple times, especially after seeing Mission Impossible 2. If you've seen Mission Impossible 2, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that opening credit scene. But let's get right into it. Garrett, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So tell us more about yourself and your role and the game that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so my name is Garrett Gibbons. We're based in Philadelphia, and I'm the producer, for lack of a better term, of First Ascent. So this game is created in collaboration with my partner, Kate Oddie. She's really the powerhouse brains behind the operation and creative genius. She is a creator, designer, illustrator, graphic designer, rulebook editor, everything. And she's been working on this game for about 3 years, and about a year ago I came on board really hands-on to work on the back end stuff of logistics and marketing and figuring out how we were going to make this thing a reality by launching it on Kickstarter, which is happening June 15th. We're getting really close. So yeah, that's my goal. I play tested the game a ton as well. I came on board to help with the play testing, and I was also responsible for getting it uploaded on Tabletop Simulator and doing a lot of the virtual play testing that had to happen during the COVID quarantine and stuff like that.
Awesome. Now, because you're working so close, can you speak to the theme? Before we started in the chat, you were talking about rock climbing yourself personally, or being in a gym. Can you speak to your history of rock climbing and how this game kind of progressed to that theme? Was it the theme first and then mechanics?
Yeah, absolutely. So First Ascent is a rock climbing themed board game, and it's not a mountain climbing game. And I think that's one of the things maybe I'll touch on later. But it's really about rock climbing, which isn't always about getting to the top. It's more about the skills you use, managing resources, and employing a good strategy to climb a great route, which may mean that it looks very cool. So our background in the theme is that we're actually rock climbers first. So Kate and I have both been rock climbing for about 6 to 7 years. It's our real passion in life. I mean, it's beyond a hobby. If I were to flip this camera around, it's a gear room full of rock climbing gear. Yeah, we've been doing it. We climb together as partners a lot. And we love to go to this place called the Gunks in New York. That's our main spot, and we climb in local climbing gyms around Philadelphia. We actually met in a climbing gym, and so yeah, we've loved climbing for years, and we also love board games. And so this project was the perfect way to blend those two things together. And the theme really did drive the development of the game. I mean, in the very early origins of First Ascent actually come from a conversation Kate was having with one of our climbing partners about how you meet all these characters while you're climbing, and you often recommend a climbing partner to someone else, and they jokingly said, wouldn't it be nice to have a baseball card that you could hand someone and it would have their stats, like this person's always going to be on time, but you better be ready for like a strenuous day and you're going to have to like hoof it, or this person's more lackadaisical but they have great snacks, and you're going to laugh the whole day. So and then there's also these like climbing archetypes that kind of come up again and again, and so that was the basis of the idea of characters. And then there's just a lot of elements of climbing that are really obvious to gamify, a progress and ascent up a cliff face, and yeah, so that's sort of the thematic origins of First Ascent.
That's cool. So, I mean, having so much experience, you didn't have to reference a lot. And this is just me assuming, you didn't have to reference a lot to put into the game because you have the experience. You know what needs to be in the game as bare bones, and how to create tracks and how to really manage your resources. And back to what you were saying about characters, I never thought that. Oh yeah, we are all different people. How does that come out in climbing? So that's really cool too. But I'm curious to know, did you have to do more research for this game?
So a lot of it was really like intuitive because I mean, climbing is once you get into climbing, it's like a totally different language, so that kind of like technical aspect was we already had that really strong basis for that. So we didn't have to do much research in that area. What Kate did a lot of research on, which is really cool, are the tiles that you ascend. So in First Ascent, there's different hex tiles, and these represent pitches. And a pitch is sort of a rope length that you would climb up a cliff face. And so you're ascending up the mountain through these series of pitches, which are just each individual hex tiles. So each hex tile is named after a real rock climb. And so Kate did a lot of research to make sure that different areas of the country were represented and that those climbs were sort of fit. There's also another characterization, which is the type of pitch. And so there's these different features. And so she really like made sure that the pitch that she was choosing was truly representative of that type of a feature. And also, there's a bunch of personal objectives, and those relate to certain things that are in reality. For example, climb routes in southern states. So we had to make sure that there was enough routes represented from southern states that was a reasonable objective to fulfill, or climb pitches that are in Rocky Mountain National Park or in the national parks and stuff, or climb pitches with animals in the names, like really fun stuff like that. And so to get that balance right, Kate did do a lot of research. And so we've actually rock climbed probably, I would say around 15 to 20% of the actual tiles that are in the game, but there's a lot of them in there that we haven't climbed or are very tough climbs that we would hope to one day.
That's awesome. Little side note, this is kind of gross, but anytime I talk about rock climbing, even watching the movie Free Solo, my palms get really sweaty. So I've been to a rock climbing gym and I've done it a couple times, but then I couldn't do it because my palms were just so gross. I had the bag of chalk, I had all that stuff, but I would just sweat through the chalk. I'm just here listening to you talk about rock climbing. Like, yes, it sounds so fun, but I don't think I'd be able to continue on doing it because my palms right now are just glistening.
Well, I hope that would happen while you play the game as well.
Yeah, to
maybe
get into that theme.
Maybe not. Don't want to get the pieces all sweaty.
Right, have like little black edges and oh man. So I do want to talk about. Let's go back to playtesting because you did playtest it and you marketed the game. When from the first time you played it to now you have a finished product. And it's going to be on Kickstarter real soon. What was that journey like for you, having a virtual playtest and putting it up on Tabletop Simulator for other people to try?
Yeah, so from the very beginning, it's really fun. We have all the prototypes through time in a box somewhere. We have lots of photos, and it's interesting. From the beginning, sort of the core elements of the game have stayed the same in that you play as a character and you're climbing up the different tiles and you're using skills and gear to ascend up these tiles and gaining points through that. So from the beginning, we knew it wasn't a race to the top. It's sort of a strategy. How do you get points by climbing these tiles? So that part of the game has really stayed essentially the same. And so we play tested, we did lots of like printing things out, putting them on cardboard, hand cutting them out, playing with friends and family early on, just finding out, there were certain cards types that we don't have anymore, or like just very basic, like, how does this even work? And I remember the very first time we like played it where it actually worked as a game, I was like, that's it, we're done, it's good to go. And Kate's like, pump your brakes here, like, let's do this right. And so that's sort of our dynamic, is like, I'm the like, this is awesome, let's go. And Kate's very like pragmatic and like a perfectionist. And so one of the coolest things to see in that progression is the changing of the artwork over time, where it went from just a word written, and then it went to a piece of gear sitting on a rock to a piece of gear being used in practice, or like from a sketch to Kate's like really nice vector illustrations. But the playtesting itself, after we played with friends and family a good number of times, we eventually got it to a place where we knew we needed broader input. We played it with a lot of climbers who loved it because of the theme, but we said, from the beginning, we wanted this to be a game that was good for climbers, attracted climbers because of the theme, and maybe pulled them into board games. But we knew we wanted it to be something that board gamers would enjoy, even if they don't rock climb. And so that's when we set out to really test that and make sure that we could achieve that. And so we were at a version that we were able to upload into Tabletop Simulator. And shout out to the Ludo Lodge YouTube channel. I refer everyone to that because it was the resource to make that happen. And once we uploaded on Tabletop Simulator, we got involved with our local Game Makers Guild. So the Philadelphia Game Makers Guild was something we learned about. I sort of skipped ahead. We actually play tested at PAX Unplugged in 2019. So we're in Philadelphia, and this was just in our backyard, and we're like, we have to go. And so I think that was when we started playing with, kind of gamers and moving into that. And then that's when we learned about the Game Makers Guild and the Game Crafter and stuff. And so when we put it up on Tabletop Simulator to virtually play test, the Game Makers Guild was doing weekly play tests, and that was just an amazing resource. We started playing the game with them a good number of times, and that's when we got a lot of feedback about balancing the game, and sort of that's when we really started to hone in on thinking very critically about how much we wanted it to be strategy versus chance in a game. And we realized we were kind of in this middle zone where people who love intense strategy were not thrilled with sort of the randomness of certain elements of the game. For example, when you climb, you draw a card, and sometimes those would be good and sometimes they would be bad. And it'd be really frustrating if you kept drawing bad ones, and your great strategy is just thwarted for for random chance.
Yeah.
And so those cards evolved into becoming choices. And those choices now, allow you to, sometimes the choices aren't great, but you have a sense of control and you can sort of mitigate the risk as much as you want. We had another element. At one point, there was a dice rolling element to the game, and that was another element of chance that people who enjoy strategy were not thrilled with. And so that evolved into an optional sort of push your luck mechanic in the game, where you can roll a dice to get lucky, but if you roll one of the options, you may pay a price. So the Game Makers Guild really helped us think more critically about who this game was for, and we really decided, okay, it's really a strategy game, and we want people to be able to plot a great route up this mountain. The other thing they helped us realize were, we were having significant traffic jams on the board where characters would just get all jammed up and you couldn't move, and it was frustrating. So we introduced a feature called the ledge halfway up the mountain, where it's kind of like a highway that you can move across. And so that really freed up a lot of the traffic jams we were running into. I realized that there was a bit of analysis paralysis that was happening with people at the beginning of the game. They wanted to plot their entire route up this mountain, and so they would try to do that all before the first turn. And ultimately, what we did was we said the top half of the mountain is going to be flipped over, so you can't see the top half of the mountain when you start the game. So you can only plot your route to a certain extent, but having the ledge will, once you reach the ledge, the top half is revealed. And then the ledge allows you the flexibility to reassess your strategy, and sort of it added this element of sort of think on your feet. What are you going to do now? Which objectives are you going to go for? And we really liked how that came out of the play testing, but it's also like very thematically appropriate for having to adapt as you rock climb.
As going back to, just want to talk quickly about the pitches. Are those tiles on the board? Is the board always changing? Is it a different setup every time?
Yeah, exactly. So the board is set up as just an outline of where the pitches go, and the point values are established. So the board is balanced in that there's always going to be a 5-point tile at the top, and there's always going to be a 1-point tile on the bottom. So the point value of the pitches is always going to be the same, but there are many pitches with the unique with that point value. So every time you set it up, the board game will be entirely unique, but well balanced because of the sort of I guess you'd call it like semi-modular.
Modular, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, once you got all these resources, you're at PAX, you have all this feedback. The game, I mean, you did talk about some of the changes, but did the game ultimately change a lot over all of the feedback, or was it just slight changes here and there as far as like moving the board over the top of the ledge? Like, were those the biggest changes, or was there anything else in between?
Yeah, I think what we found was that as we continued to play test, I mean, a lot of it was Kate and I playing it over and over to balance characters and stuff, and we found that we wanted to deepen the strategy in a way. So I think as we identified, okay, this is a strategy game, we added this additional element of set matching. We call it using good technique, and so all the cards have. So the cards that you hold in your hand are different types of rock climbing skills or gear. And those are the resources that you pay in order to climb the mountain. But in addition to that, they all have little, not all of them, many of them have little symbols on them that are the technique. So there's power, pain tolerance, precision, and balance. And so these are like real techniques we use in rock climbing. And if you pay resources to climb a pitch and you match 3 of those technique symbols, it gives you 2 bonus points. And so this is actually a very powerful way to gain points, and it's a set matching thing that we added in. And so we like this because it added a layer of strategic depth for people who've played it multiple times. And we found that this was something that first-time players could kind of take it or leave it. They often won't win if they, don't pay attention to it, but they don't have to fully understand it in order to play the game the first time.
Thank you for letting me know. I'm not going to explain that to anyone when I play this game. Like, don't pay attention to those cards over there, but I'm going to have them all in front of me.
Yeah, so we also added these other things called summit beta tokens, which are just like, so in climbing, this is a term we've had to clarify. Beta is like advice from someone else. So these are tokens that always give you some beneficial reward. And those are built into, in the climbing cards I mentioned, there's choices. And so there's only so many choices you want to make regarding resource management. And these Summit Beta tokens added a little bit of a karma element to the choices. You could sort of make some sacrifice in order to gain this positive token that will give you a positive result later, but you don't necessarily know what it is. And so what ended up happening, the other thing we built in is sort of an engine building component. When you're paying these resources to climb the pitches over and over again, we wanted that to represent the progression of development or learning of a skill. So, for example, there's face climbing skills. If you climb several pitches and you continue to use face climbing skills to climb those tiles, you get a earned permanent asset. So that can count towards pitches in the future. So you earn it and it stays on your board and you use it forever. And it's a little bit of an engine building component. So through adding these elements, what we found was that from that starting point of the core game, we had sort of, the pendulum had swung as we adapted to make it a more strategic game to becoming more complex than what some people were comfortable with who were rock climbers but not gamers. And so I said early on that, we really intentionally wanted this to be something that climbers and gamers would both enjoy. And so when we got to sort of where the game is now, which is a full like strategic game with layers of sort of depth to it, it's a lot to learn for people who aren't used to learning and playing board games. So when we, just take it to our group of rock climbers, learning board games is a skill that I think a lot of us in the climbing community may not appreciate if all of our friends are used to it. Maybe you appreciate it when you try to teach a game to your family or, and you're like, man, I didn't think this was that complicated, but they're not getting it. And teaching games is a skill as well. But we ended up saying, okay, so it's a little heavy for casual climbers who don't game. So what we ended up doing was making a guide mode version, and that guide mode is a very stripped down, simplified version where you're essentially just climbing up the mountain and drawing these event cards. And it's a really great way to teach people, introduce people to it. And then once they've played that once or twice, adding in those additional components of techniques and earned assets, it's much easier.
I'm a huge fan. Well, first of all, big fan of the theme. Big fan that you are right now at this crossroads of board games and themes. Because I don't want to play. I'll play them, but a game about colonialism or a game about the 1800s railroads, right? Like, so this is such a unique theme. So you have the theme, but also you're thinking about people around what you're passionate about that you want to experience this game. So you kind of have a gateway game mode, and you use the word heavy. Do you know how heavy this game will be for people who are more experienced with board games?
Yeah, for people who are experienced with board games, it's a very mid-weight game. Yeah, okay. It doesn't hit as a heavy. I use that as a relative term for folks that aren't familiar. But if you've played anything like the games that are over your shoulders, this would definitely fall squarely in a midweight.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. So let's talk about some marketing, because you've been marketing this game. We've had this global pandemic, and everything kind of went digital. Well, it had to go digital, if you will. Can you tell us about your experience with marketing this game, and maybe some inspiration from the before times to help you push forward through your marketing now?
Yeah, I'll say this, that when we started this project, we were completely naive to what it would take to get a board game created and produced and funded on Kickstarter. We've started from scratch, and so there are so many great resources that I'm so grateful for. Jamie Stegmeyer's blog and book and podcasts, and those got me into the Facebook groups. There's a lot of board game design Facebook groups, and the board game marketing Facebook group, and others. So those resources have been so huge, and that's where we learned basically everything. And I think early on, I definitely struggled with the concept of marketing, because I think this is a relatable feeling. Like, I don't think people want to be spammy or to feel like you're selling something all the time. So, I don't remember exactly which book it came from, but it was one of the sort of Kickstarter launch books, where it was this mentality switch of I'm not trying to sell you something, I'm offering something of value that I genuinely think you will enjoy. And that for me was really useful. And I think the other thing is, by having a game that we love to play, and that is clearly a passion project and something that I've watched Kate, put so much effort into, and I see when I'm like, yo, that's fine. Just leave it like that. And she pushes it and makes it better. I'm like, wow, that really does make it better. It's really a thing that I love and believe in. So that made all of this possible and easier, because without that core, deep feeling of I love this thing and I want to share it with other people, I think I would struggle with some of the marketing elements. And so, so from that point, so to touch on I guess I'm not sure if I got off topic from your original question. Do you want me to go into some of what we've done for the market?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because it's a labor of love. It's a passion project for you right now. And is marketing do you do that for a living? Is that a day job thing, or is that something you kind of had to learn?
Yeah, no, we learned it from scratch. So
marketing is difficult.
Yeah, I'm a research scientist. At least Kate's a graphic designer, so her day job worked really well with designing the game, but mine did not. So my day job as a research scientist worked well in terms of getting quotes for manufacturing and freight and those logistics, but not so much for marketing. But like I said, we had a ton of resources. From Nolan, there was shoot, I'm sorry on this podcast that I'm blanking on the name, a packet of information that I downloaded, and it's now in its second evolution. Do you know what the updated evolution of it is called?
I'm not sure what that is.
Okay. So Nolan on Board Game Marketing has these amazing resources that are available. They're like PDFs, and they just laid out a very simple framework of marketing for me. And a lot of that, like what I learned was like, our first approach was going to be organic marketing, just get the word out about the game through Facebook groups, through telling our friends, through, even pre-pandemic, we took a very early version of this game to a rock climbing gym and showed some folks. And the other thing that we learned early on was like, start building an email list. Like that's what we consistently heard. So we set up an email list, started that, just with our friends and our family. And then, anytime we would talk with people, we would start adding them to that list. Then, I feel like as things went completely online, I kind of jumped in once things were already online. So I like very early on wanted to start running Facebook ads because I felt like I didn't know how to do the organic marketing thing. And ultimately what I found was that it was kind of too early, if I could say. Like I like dabbled in Facebook ads. So for context, like our campaign is launching June 15th. This was like in October of last year. I was like fired up. I was like, we're going to run Facebook ads. And I like read, in some blogs, like people saying like, look, leads or email addresses we acquired 8 months before the campaign were as valuable as emails we acquired as right near the campaign launch. So that was my rationale. I dabbled in it and then ultimately like realized that we hadn't sort of fully explored the organic advertising type, organic like things that we could do. So a lot of it was in not only board game Facebook groups, being involved, like reading things, learning. And as I learned, then, seeing very like, at first I felt like I don't have anything to offer. I don't know anything, but like I stuck around and read stuff for a little while. And then you start to see some of the same, like, really basic questions come up again. And you're like, oh, well, I do know, I've read this thing. And I had this imposter syndrome for a while where it was like, well, I haven't done it. Like I just read it. And I think that was something I kind of had to get over and just be like, you were new once and somebody giving you a nice answer was helpful to bring them into the community. So that was sort of my approach, was like, hey, just like give a nice response to people. And I found that the Facebook groups were a great place for that. I dabbled on Reddit a little bit, and I'm not a regular Reddit user, and I found that like wasn't a space that worked well for me. So I've just like decided not to pursue that, right? So what I found was that it was like emotionally and intellectually like draining to try to engage there. But like, for example,
Reddit is difficult.
I'm really active in like, I like to use Instagram, for example. So what we did was on our, First Ascent Instagram was we started just posting regularly, and made a sort of conscious decision that we were going to do, kind of quality content, not sort of the day-to-day sort of stuff that I would post on my personal Instagram of like, but like really be a little thoughtful about what I'm posting and like add some text to it that like talks about the game and not just like, hey, here's some pretty artwork, right? Or like if I post a cool climbing picture, like talk about what that climb meant to us or like how that related to the game, or like what techniques we were using. So it became a more intentional use of Instagram, I guess I would say, where like each post like had a purpose instead of just like, here's something pretty to look at. And I think that was a really useful thing and led to a lot of like great discussions with people. And I really enjoy that.
Because it didn't feel watered down. when you posted it was meaningful. You could have a conversation with someone.
Yeah, and it pushed me to think more deeply about why I was posting a certain thing, and just like, what's the purpose, and does it, and a lot of them, they could be teachable things. Like, we know a lot of things about climbing, like, can we explain things about climbing to gamers, and vice versa? Can we explain how, a gaming mechanic works in the game? And like, all of a sudden some climbers are going to see that and be like, I don't know what engine building means in a game, and hopefully become interested. So that being said, we really tried to pursue the organic marketing as much as possible. And then more recently, in like January, February, started running more Facebook ad stuff. And luckily we had a friend who does it professionally, and was able to help us get up and running. Had just a few phone, Skype calls with me and helped me do the groundwork. And that was really helpful. And so, go ahead.
I was going to ask, from your first piece of marketing to the marketing that you're doing now, what would you tell yourself from your first piece to the last one you just put out? Like,
that's a good question.
Because I'm sure it's definitely matured, because now you know so much more than when you first started. Because when obviously you started from scratch. So what would you tell yourself, and how have you seen yourself grow?
Yeah, I mean, I think that more in terms of the paid like Facebook ad stuff, I think that's just been a continual sort of, I think we did pretty good right off the bat in terms of like, I knew we were paying for it. So like, use a really good, image, and be really thoughtful about what you're writing. And like, I did the research on that, where I feel like, I think what's evolved has been sort of like playing with the audience that we're targeting. And I feel like I haven't learned a ton there. I still feel like I'm kind of like trying to optimize it, and that's something that is ongoing. I guess the thing I would tell myself is like, be patient. The thing I thought was going to happen when I first pressed, the ad, was I thought like 10 seconds later we were going to have a bunch of likes and email signups and stuff. Our first ads were all sending people to a landing page to sign up for the email, and I thought, it was going to be like a light switch, spending $10 a day. And that's just not the reality, right? Like, at $10 a day, what we saw was a very like linear, slow growth of website traffic and email signups. It wasn't an immediate thing. So I think the advice would be like, be patient. And then, going back to the organic marketing stuff, the advice is like, be intentional, don't just post willy-nilly, post something with meaning.
And I think from what I gather earlier, that's what Kate is, right? She is she is patient and intentional with the game, because you said yourself, you're like, yes, let's do this. This is good.
Yeah, and that change was actually like instigated by a post that I did, just like sort of willy-nilly, like, here's something to look at. And Kate said, hey, like, this isn't a very good picture. Like, let's talk about why are we posting this, and so yeah, it really was her guidance to say, let's be intentional.
Thank you for being on here with me this evening. Oh my God, I haven't had my coffee, hasn't kicked in yet this morning. I just have a couple more questions for you before we wrap. The game, is it 2 to 5, 2 to 4, 1 to 5? How many players is the game?
Yeah, I could talk about this all day. I love this. It's a 2 to 5 player game. Again, like a solid midweight strategy with guide mode to teach people. It's 2 to 5, but there's a 2-sided board. So speaking of the replayability, so 2 to 3 players play on a smaller, more compact space. And what that does is allows for a little more player interaction. And then the 4 to 5 player board is on the opposite side, and it's a larger mountain, and that allows for preventing too many traffic jams and keeps the game really scalable.
Awesome. And you're launching June 15th. Is there a time that you're launching?
Yep, June 15th. I'm not exactly sure on the time. Maybe
when you hit the button, you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
And what is your price point?
So the game is going to be $60 plus shipping. One caveat is that we are only fulfilling in North America. We found that just the issues with, the evolving situation of taxes and VAT and customs in the UK and EU and the volatile freight market, we're just not in a position for our first, this is our first campaign. We just want to keep things simple and make sure that we can fulfill our promises. So that is one thing that we are hoping to explore in the future. And, hopefully when there's late pledges on a pledge manager, hopefully we'll get that stuff sorted out. But that's a big challenge right now.
Okay. Do you have any stretch goals or any deluxe editions that you may want to put out, or is that for the expansion stuff?
Yeah, who knows if we'll do an expansion? I'd love to. I mean, it's amazing how many new ideas keep coming up. But the game, again, we're going to keep it simple. So there's one version of the game. There's not a basic and a deluxe. And we will, I love that the spirit of crowdfunding is to make that one version of the game the best version it can be for everyone. And so we will have stretch goals that will be really focused on just improving the components and really improving the quality of the manufactured game. We're really excited, even if we just get the base model of the game, that it'll be a really high quality game. I mean, especially with the amount of custom artwork that we have in there already, but we think we have fun ideas for stretch goals like printed meeples and, just improving the card stock and things like that. But yeah, I think it'll be great to work together to try to reach those goals.
Fantastic. I know I'll be backing this game. Do you want to plug the website and your social media?
Yeah, so our website is playfirstascent.com, and there you can sign up for the newsletter to be notified when the campaign goes live. And our Instagram is First Ascent Game at Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on this morning with me, Garrett. I feel like we're going to be doing this again. I'm sure there's been other ideas as you've probably been fine tuning this game. So yeah. I'm looking forward to chatting with you in the future. But until we do, happy gaming.
I would love to. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.